So good morning, dear Thai, dear community, dear friends. So thank you for being here for our day of mindfulness today. So let's start this session with coming back to our bodies, making sure we have a comfortable posture so that we can dwell in our bodies, making sure we have a stable contact with the floor, with the earth through the chair or the mat and cushion. Can wiggle around a little bit to feel like our pelvis is gently tilting forward, our back naturally stretching upward, our chest and abdominal area can be open. We can rest our hands in our lap, on each other, on the knees. And we can gently have a half gaze in front of us or close our eyes. Take a couple of deep in and out breaths to really arrive in this body, to really arrive in our seat. We allow ourselves the gift to be present and to keep bringing our attention, our awareness back to the breath and the body if we get distracted or carried away. Just enjoying our in-breath and enjoying our out-breath with the sound of the bell. So good morning, dear teacher, dear community, dear friends, dear everyone. Um, so we're in the year 2020, or the year of the rat, February 9th. But we also know that many people on this planet have a different way of counting their calendar. Would say it's a different year. Maybe use the month of the Lunar New Year or the lunar calendar to describe the months. But we see there seem to be like time is coming and time is going. A day comes and then the night comes and it kind of continues. But as we come together at Deer Park to practice, we can also see that both the past and the future is already in this present moment. Not as an idea, but how can we touch it? And so this year, Deer Park turns 20. So it's the day Deer Park turns 20, but it's a process of turning 20. It's a manifestation. It's not a separate self, an individual, or even a collective that is stagnant that turns 20 and then it turns 21. But it's a process of unfolding, of maturing. And so when we look at this image of the valley of Deer Park, it's taken from the waterfall, we can also remember the people that have lived on this land for a long time. It is the Kumeyaay Nation and the Louisiana tribe territories. And there's many locations on this land where you can for sure say that native populations have lived and celebrated life. So we don't come just from nowhere. And Deer Park didn't just appear out of nothing. A couple of years ago, I saw an article in a San Diego magazine. It's from '69. At that time, the Peace Corps had a training camp here. And it was a photo of this plateau with a number of white canvas tents where young people came to live and to train before they went out and do service work in the world. And there's been the California Conservation Corps too, doing a lot of the land work around. And so we can see this stream of ancestors we can talk about that leads up to this present moment. And I think for those of us who were here in the beginnings of this incarnation of Deer Park, you see the transformation of the land and of the energy of the place significantly, because the last use before the monastery moved in was a sheriff's SWAT shooting exercise grounds. And so friends collected buckets and buckets of bullets and bullet shells and had to refurbish all the buildings to have any livable spaces. And so to even look for this place and find it was a wish from the Vietnamese community in Southern California, maybe across California. Thai, our teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, had been coming to California to give teachings for a couple of decades already in many different retreat centers, university campuses. But we didn't have a Plum Village Monastery or practice center yet. And so some really wanted to find the land to build a monastery and a practice center for themselves and for their children, their grandchildren, and for many people near and far away to benefit from the teaching and practices. So looking at this image, you see Deer Park looks very green, so lush. And so Deer Park, again, doesn't have a separate self. Our experience, our subjective experience of Deer Park is not an objective reality that exists somewhere, but we're co-creating it. Sometimes I'm surprised when siblings say like, Deer Park is not green. It's not very green here. I said, really? And then after a couple of years, I started realizing, wow, it also our perception and how we experience a place now is the greenest part of the year, and it goes more and more golden as summer and fall continues. And many times our larger Sangha would visit in the fall time, September, October, for large retreats with our teacher, and it's golden, it's Deer Park golden period. And so it seemed like it's not very green. But that's kind of like the hibernation season for the plant life. And so for me, growing up in Sweden during winter, there's like the pine forest is green, but apart from that, there's no grass, there's no flowers, there's no leaves on the trees, so not very green. So here through the year, it's amazing, it's so green. You see, it depends on our previous experience, how we see and experience things, and how we would describe something. And so Deer Park is this manifestation of so many people, so many people's good intention, kindness of their hearts, their words, their actions that lead us up to this moment. And we are fortunate to be able to be part of it, to co-create, to help the manifestation and maturation of Deer Park continue. And so this talk started manifesting on Tuesday. We had a Dharma teacher meeting for the spring season, and we realized we didn't have anyone to give the talks the next couple of weeks. So a sister volunteered for next week, and another sister volunteered for the following week. And then the sister said, how about a brother this Sunday then? At that meeting, there wasn't that many of us to choose from. So I nominated myself, and the brother next to me is a Dharma teacher in training. I've been giving him a lot of opportunities to train. But he say, I'm not ready yet. So he's offering his love through the meal at lunchtime today. So you get to appreciate his joy and his freedom through lunchtime. Maybe later in the year. So very much like today, we practiced walking meditation on this land for the last 20 years. And at times we've been fortunate for our teacher to come and lead retreats and offer talks and lead the walking meditation. So this comes from the English retreat in 2013. It's the last retreats season Thai was here to teach. And during that stay, Thai came up and visited the brothers one day, and we had tea in the Venerable's tea room. And after that, Thai and his attendant was walking around solidity, and I joined them. We're walking around, looking here and looking there. Every now and then we'd stop, and Thai would like take something in or ask something. And so we walk around the hamlet, and we're coming down the steps toward the dining hall. Maybe 1/3 down, Thai stopped. He looked back at me. He asked, how come Deer Park doesn't have any novices? At that time, we didn't have any novice brothers or sisters here. And earlier that year, they had 4 brothers, novice brothers at Blue Cliff ordaining, so they were with us during the tour. And so the Sangha was very happy to have younger brothers and sisters from the US ordaining and being trained in the US. It's kind of like also a new branch of our Sangha tree in the US. And the question went in, and I shared it with other brothers. And so about a year later, we had our first novice ordained here. And I refer to him as kind of the novice ancestor. He stayed a monk for about a year. He says it's too difficult. He was the way youngest one. He was 19 when he ordained. The next brothers were like 32. And they were either newly ordained bhikshu or Dharma teachers already. And they hadn't been born and raised and educated on this land, so he felt like he didn't have any peers, no real close friends to relate to. And so luckily we've been able to persevere, and now we have 3 novice sisters and 8 novice brothers and a couple of aspirants in training. So that is our answer to Thai. That is the continuation of Thai's aspiration for the Sangha to grow. And not just grow in monastic members, we also grow tremendously in lay members and people that come and benefit from the practice and bringing the practice back home into the world. So I'm hoping that Deer Park is not just a location for you to go and spend a Sunday, but a spiritual home, as a spiritual refuge to really get nourished, to help our healing, our transformation. And so then whatever we do when we go walk down the hill, when we drive down the freeway, when we come back to our families and friends, when we go to work, the way that we will live, the way we will interact will be a little bit more free, a little bit more loving, a little bit more peaceful, right? So this period of time here at Deer Park, we're preparing for our Earth Holder Retreat. We'll have Earth Holder Retreat in a couple of weeks. And we started on last Thursday to have a documentary. It's called Before the Flood, the National Geographic's documentary, to understand more about climate change and the impact that's happening right now. Well, that was what happened already 4 years ago, and it kind of continues to happen much more quickly than any scientist could imagine. And so this Earth Holder community is inspired by the Bodhisattva Dharanidhara. It's mentioned in the Lotus Sutra, and Tai shares a little bit about it in his commentaries and also in the book The World We Have. And so Dharanidhara is the Bodhisattva of earth protecting, of earth holding. It's a Bodhisattva who helped build bridges of communication and connection between people, between species, and then also engage to understand the destruction of the air, the water, the earth, in a way to help also transform our way of relating to the earth. And so as I was looking for images to represent the earth holder, there's a lot of images with humans holding the earth. It's very nice. Many people holding the earth also. But for me, the most important practice of an earth holder, if we want to engage in this bringing healing and transformation to our world, is that we know that we are held by the earth. That the earth is a refuge for us. There is a source of life, of love, and rejuvenation that is always available to us. And so the theme of this coming retreat is we are the earth, walking on the earth. And so it's not just a statement, but it's a practice for us. Actually, it's just describing what's already going on, but am I aware of it? Can I touch it? What would my day look like if I feel like I'm the earth walking on earth? Where would I put my time and energy? What things in my daily life would stir me up, would make me sad, irritated, disparaging, jealous? Would I be able to stay more focused, more present, more loving and more peaceful? So that is a challenge, an invitation. How do I feel? How do I experience my body, my feelings, my mind, if I touch that I am the earth, walking on earth? On Thursday, we also had a sharing after the documentary, sharing about feelings and emotions coming up in us and how we practice with them. And one of my youngest siblings say, I don't want to waste time. That's a very clear and beautiful aspiration. We've been trained to waste a lot of time, to procrastinate with this and that, to run after so many things. We're rushing around, and do we know where we're going? Maybe we're already stopped and know where we're going, know how to use our times at times, but how much and how often? So this statement really inspired me. I say it's easy to waste time. Yeah, it's very easy. And so that invites me back, because when I come back to the present, whether through my breath or through my steps, actually things transform very quickly. My view and my experience of things change. So it's not only transformation as a long journey, like we have to travel and travel, try hard for years and years until we can have some healing and transformation. It can happen right away. One in breath, one out breath, one sound of the bell, smiling to the sound of the bell. So Thai has invited us to another very lovely practice, is to fall in love with Mother Earth. To fall in love with Mother Earth. Not just appreciating, not just being a little bit fond of, not just, popping in and out of relationship with the earth, but to fall in love with the earth. I think the invitation is also to stay in love with the earth. That's maybe more difficult even. So we can re-fall in love with the earth. And we might have ideas about what the earth is. When we talk about environmental degradation or climate change, who it is affecting. Is it like the earth, like the planet? It's amazing that we've been able to have astronauts to see the earth rise, coming around the moon. And seeing this round planet with a tiny atmosphere, making life possible, just soaring in empty space. So that's one view, one experience of the earth, right? We might see it as this one planet in a galaxy. But we can also see it as the topsoil of our planet, on top of the hard crust, that is making plant life and animal life possible. So as we're breathing, I like to fall in love with the earth by cherishing the presence of the plant life on this planet. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in the oxygen produced by the trees. I depend on the plant life to transform the carbon dioxide I breathe out to oxygen that I can breathe back in. So yesterday during our walking meditation, it was a bright sunny day. I was walking hand in hand with my mom, and we came out to this bush right here in front of the hall. And it's full of bees and bumblebees. So how can I fall in love with the insects of this earth? All the many animals on this earth. And all the many people. See, here's a spring hike a couple years ago. And the California poppies is well worth to stop and enjoy. And so as we're practicing coming back to our breath, our steps, to stop with the sound of the bell, is to be able to be present. To be present what is going on inside and around us. To be able to establish contact with the flower. If we don't just have a thought and an idea and thinking of the flower. Actually, we can touch it through our eyes, through our nose. We can touch the flower, the life of the flower through our ears as the bees are buzzing around. I also practice to touch the plants, to fall in love with the earth. This morning, walking out of the hall after sitting, I was touching and rubbing a white sage leaf a little bit. Kind of make you sticky. So fragrant. So if we really want to fall in love with the earth, we have to create this direct contact with the earth through our senses, not just our thinking, our ideas. I know the earth, I know everything. I can talk for hours about the plants and animals here. But still we might not be able to get the nourishment, the strength, the courage that the natural world can offer us. So we're very lucky here to have 467 acres at Deer Park and our good neighbor Daily Ranch with a lot of hiking trails. And so the Daily Ranch is a wonderful place of refuge where we can roam around for many miles. That is also reserved to the plant and animal life. So to also have these places where we can go to really immerse ourselves in the natural world is really important. So also, do we have time for it? Do we have access to it? Brother Yasha, when he left Deer Park to go back to Indonesia, he went for a 90-day retreat with his ordination teacher in Indonesia. And they were staying in one of their temples at the outskirts of Jakarta. And it's still kind of like an urban environment. And he said every day he went out and walked barefoot on a little plot of grass that was in the temple, just to really connect with the natural world. So we don't have to wait until we come to a national park, or if we're able to come here, or even the park around the block. Hopefully you have a park around the block. Everyone should have a park around the block that is should be part of the human rights. Maybe it is already. We just should put it into practice. So when I was maybe tween or early teenager, there was a song. It says, "If you were king for just one day," and then it went on to saying like what you would do in that time. I could make a long list on that one. There's so many beautiful things that we can transform our society and our world. And so when I'm reflecting on places in nature that I've gone for refuge and that help restore me, as flowing water have a particular place in my heart. And this is a mountain stream in the Rocky Mountains. And for many years, when I first came to Deer Park, we used to have retreats in the Rocky Mountains at the YMCA. And some years with Thai and some years a smaller delegation. And when we had meetings for that retreat, I was very quick to volunteer to go. I think I went 6 years in a row. So I apologize if I took the spot of anyone else. But and just sitting next to this creek that was at the outskirts of the Y, it was just the water flowing by. And somehow the water had the insight of not getting stuck. It keeps flowing and adjusting and moving without seemingly much complaint, right? There's a boulder there, okay, either I go over it or I go around it. Maybe I even start carving out under it. Maybe there's a tree falling over the creek. Maybe for a while it gets blocked up, but then eventually there's enough water drops to flow over, and slowly go around. So I find this also a very beautiful metaphor for practice of transformation on an individual and a collective scale too. That we don't stop at the stone and say, "Stone, you shouldn't be here. I need to flow through right here. What are you doing here? You're obstructing my flow and my path." We just flow around it. We just continue. We don't let obstacles on our path take us away from what we're up to. We have to adjust to it, and we can continue. And in doing so, we also help smoothen out the rock, time by time by time. The rock will be smoothened out. And with time, it becomes pebbles, and with time, it can become fine sand. On some of the mountain paths, where it's kind of flat, the surface is like thick sand. Because it's just been there erosion happening, and slowly, slowly the rock is kind of being graded down to fine sand. So when we talk about transformation and healing the earth, it's also interesting to see what kind of time perspective do we have. For the earth, time is not the question. We know that species are going extinct, hundreds of them every day. And that if we continue in the direction we're going, humans won't be around for that much longer, or not that many of us at least. So when we're looking at falling in love with the earth, it also includes falling in love with ourselves. And I think any true love includes not just the beautiful parts of ourselves, the thing we appreciate, the parts of ourselves we want to present and want others to see, but also the thing we're actually not. I hope no one sees that in me. Can we also love that? Can we also love that in each other? And it's easy to love people that maybe seem close to us or familiar to us or look like us. But can our love continue to expand from people of all sizes, all colors, or ages? And not just humans, but how about the other animals? So this is falling in love with the earth. It also includes falling in love with all the children of the earth. So in a concrete way of doing this, because it's not a one-time thing, but it's this process. One beautiful practice we have is using poetry and verses. We call them gathas. And one, well, there's many of them related to water, but one is when we're washing our hands. Can follow our breathing and be aware that water is flowing over these hands. May I use them skillfully to protect all life. So also when we have these moments where we touch something vaster, something more beautiful than maybe our day-to-day experience. We call it a happy moment. We call it a legendary moment. And it can be a nourishment for us, not just in that moment, but also a resource for us to come back to. Not just a sweet memory, but to touch that experience. So this is month ago. I was with the 5 brothers up on the shaky rock up there, and we went up to see the sunset. And as the sun was setting in the ocean, we turn around and the moon, full moon, is rising over the mountains in the east. So these are just photos like 5 minutes apart or something, 10 minutes maybe. So this is kind of a legendary moment of just being up there, just seeing the vastness of touching our kind of a cosmic space too, through the moon and the sun. And so when I feel tired or I feel there's not space or there's no peace in me, I can rely on these kind of moments to remember and to bring them back alive, that experience in my body. Whatever those kind of precious moments, those precious places, those precious people that we have these legendary moments with, to bring them into our awareness and to breathe with them, to smile with them. So they're helping us, supporting us, having our back when we're not as fresh, when we're not as in awe of life, when we might be discouraged, when we might feel hurt. If we collect these pearls of experience, we can rely on them and return to them to take refuge and let them help restore us and rejuvenate us. And so here you have the first blooming mountain lilac that I've discovered, full bloom. I invite you to come up and smell it and enjoy the fragrance afterwards. It's, you look at one flower, it doesn't look like much, but you look at maybe 50 flowers on one little bunch like that, and then how many flowers on a branch, on a bush, and then you, in a couple of weeks you look over the mountainside and you have this purple way all over the mountainside. So this is to see that when we come together, when we can be a community, we can have friends going in a similar direction. Our fragrance, the way we can inspire, it magnifies. So it's this invitation of also of breaking our isolation, of feeling as a separate self, maybe lonely and cut off, but to find ways to connect with others, to feel like, actually I have people that care about the same thing as I care about. They want to live their lives and spend their time in the way I also wish to do. And when we have that kind of core group of support, we can also then easier reach out and deal with more challenging situations and people that maybe not as much of in line with how we see things, how we want to act. So it's a Sangha flower. And so again is the question we can ask ourselves, are we really there to enjoy the flower? And so to enjoy the flower is not to kind of run away from our challenges or pretend that everything's fine in the world. No, but it's for us to have a moment of healing, of nourishment and restoration and seeing, wow. Because that opens up a different kind of space in us. So if we can live and act from that space, we can envision and help things manifest. We cannot from a confined, isolated, grudging place. And so when we're standing in front of a flower, we can breathe in and out. And see if we can stay with a flower for 10 in and out breaths. Just be in touch with the flower through our eyes, maybe through our smell, maybe even just touching it. And see if we can really create a relationship between us and the flower. And so in the mountains, there's also beings that we might feel more difficult to love and feel nourished by. This is a diamondback rattlesnake I came across on the path a couple of weeks ago. I was walking with a family and we're just coming around the bend and he was curled up at the edge of the path. And have you heard a rattlesnake rattle before? Up close? Okay, this is a great opportunity to practice with fear, with original fear of wanting to survive and being very attentive to what is going on. but the fear might also make us nervous and edgy, So as we get practice with the snakes, we can see actually they just want to let us know we're there. And so we sat a little bit back up on the path for a while around the corner, so we'll be kind of quiet and out of sight. We had a 10-year-old boy with us too. He was very excited. He was very thrilled. Like, can we look at it again? And so we came around the corner and we looked just out of striking distance. And looking at it, I start talking to it and thanking it for being there and protecting the mountain and for being amazing to be able to live in this shrubbery. Like this his home, it lives there. Like come rain, come shine, Sometimes rodents come by, maybe sometimes not, So to live and survive in that environment takes a lot of intelligence, a lot of adaptability. And also they can see in the dark of that infrared, so they can sense when we're coming even in the dark, because they're also active in the dark. So just that of understanding another creature and how it lives and what its skills are, and that it also just wants to live. It's like, oh, okay, we're cool, no problem. We'll find another way down. We don't want to disturb you. It just stayed right there for 15 minutes, and we said, okay, we backtrack a little bit. So we have to ask ourselves, who are the ones in our lives that's difficult to love? Who are the ones that make us fearful, that make us want to retract, that want to make us hide, or, complain in the background? I think we all have people like that in our lives, right? So can we face them with non-fear? Can we face them with kindness, with care that they also want to live, they also want to be happy? And so we're going to go into a little bit of a sharing on the ways of putting an end to anger. In our chanting book, we have a sutra on the 5 ways of putting an end to anger. And sometimes we might feel righteous about our anger, that someone's done something, said something, or they're just a bad person, so we have all the right in the world to be angry with them. But when that happens to me, I forget that actually the anger is hurting me right in the present moment, and it's not really helping change anything or transform anything. So how can I recognize, I'm feeling angry right now? It's like our house is on fire. And so when our house is on fire, I think the intelligent thing to do is to try to extinguish the fire, right? But sometimes we want to run after the arsonist and chase him down, or figure out who did it and what happened. And we come back and our house is burned to the ground. So people are like burning out and depleting themselves, burning themselves up through being consumed by anger in activism, in many different sectors. And we think this is the energy that will bring about change. And so in these 5 ways of putting an end to anger is focusing on how we can cool the flames. We talk about anger as a poison. So as any poison, if we keep ingesting it, it will, have us in for. We'll be consumed by it. So this also, again, of like loving ourselves. So when we're angry, there's tension, there's heat, there's like hyper energy in our body. And it becomes difficult to touch the kindness in us, to touch understanding of the other person's situation or the bigger context. So we lose actually a big part of our human intelligence as, that is our strength. I think when it comes to falling in love with the earth and caring for the environment, it seems like we think humans are great, number one. This is the land of the number one, right? But we know that we're in it together with the trees and so on, and with other people. So how can we understand ourselves and how to understand them? So the sutra gives us 5 different ways of putting an end to anger. And so it shares with us, if we're wise, we know how to put an end to our anger. Sometimes we come across people whose bodily actions are not kind. Sometimes we come across people whose words are not kind. Sometimes we come across people that have unkind actions and unkind speech, but there's still a little goodness and kindness in their heart. So in these situations, one way of putting an end to our anger is to be aware of the area of that person, whether it's the little kindness in their heart, whether it's their speech, or whether it's their action that is actually still kind, so that we recognize the kindness in that person, whether through their actions, through their words, or through just the little kindnesses in their heart. Maybe they just have kind words to a couple of few people, but not to the rest of us, right? And so this again is that we come back to ourselves. We want to transform ourselves and to see that actually when we're angry, we don't make good choices most of the time. And so a way of putting an end to this anger we're experiencing, we feel someone's spoken unkindly, to recognize that, to recognize the anger we're experiencing, but also seeing, are there other elements to this person? Do they have any kind actions? Have I seen them treat anyone kindly? And this is, I resisted this for a long time, because I felt it was kind of condoning the unkindness somehow. I say, no, but unkindness is real. I'm upset because something has been hurt, something has been damaged. But when we look at how things transform and how things grow stronger, is that what we give our attention to, what we nourish, will grow. So if I look in myself and I keep seeing my weaknesses only, or when I look at other people, I complain and become upset with them because they're not, they're unkind in some way. Actually, all my focus, what I see and what I hear and what I think about is the unkindness I see maybe inside and around me. So what kind of world does that help manifest? So it's kind of challenging, but it's also actually really empowering, right? If we can start to kind of give that space, like, yeah, you cannot make me angry. I might still hold my ground and say, no, this is not kind. This is creating so much suffering. But how can we transform that anger so it doesn't burn our house down? Because if we keep holding on to it, the way we interact with even the people we so-called our friends and in our side, so-called our side, we'll not be able to be kind to them all the time. Our anger, our frustration, our irritation will also spill out on them. So it's transforming for ourselves, the people we do love and care about, and actually to support the transformation of those we feel is causing a lot of harm. And so for me, in transforming anger is also, how can I transform it in a way that kind of fiery energy can be of use. We see fire is like what makes us humans in a way. Being able to utilize fire has helped us evolve. And so how can I use the fire element in me in a way that is determined, persistent, and that doesn't like budge for obstacles? but it's still not violent. That it's not aggressive. So this is transforming anger to a deep determination. It's like, I'm staying right here and I'm going in this direction. Even if I have to trickle around the rocks and boulders and tree trunks along the way, I'm continuing to flow here, right? So this frees up a lot of energy for compassion, for determination, if we don't waste it in being angry and upset and complaining. So there's many lesser ways that anger might manifest. It's not like blown up anger, but in that of resisting, having aversion, of fighting, take a lot of energy. And so another concrete way of transforming our anger is to also recognize it when it arises and to be aware of what is some of the causes. Last week or so, I had an interaction with a brother in the office and I say some kind of short-tempered, irritated things to him. And afterwards, I realized that I'd approached him to just connect, say hello in the office. But I'd already spent a couple hours in there. I was at my limit. I just needed to go back to my room and, take it easy and rest a little bit. But then, that was where I was coming from. But in his mind, he had this question he wanted to ask me and another brother that was right there. So he said, "Oh, okay, that's great. He even asked if he can ask about it." And in that moment, I wasn't wise enough to say, maybe now is not a good time for me. Maybe later. And so we start talking, and I noticed that something that I had written off not as important, or I don't have time or energy for this, he felt like a sense, he wanted to reply to this somehow, and he wanted to discuss it with the two of us before doing so. But somehow in that moment, I didn't have any space to take in that or to talk about that. So I just said, well, I made it more complicated than it is. I say, okay, not now. Do what you want. I'm going. And in the beginning, at the end, it doesn't feel good. So afterwards, I come to him and apologize for being irritated, speaking in an irritated way. But I also can recognize that is a feeling of not having enough space in me, but then actually pushing myself over what I have to offer and connecting, but then not being actually able to hold and to be with what that person is encountering and wanting to talk about in that moment. So in this sense, it's also how do we keep our internal boundaries? How do we nourish ourselves? How do we know that, oh no, that's enough for today. I'm just going to quietly walk out of the office. So I sometimes set myself up to these things. This is amazing, huh? And so I apologize for sharing in an irritated way, but I also recognize actually what he felt this was important to him, and I also kind of devalued that. Of no, I don't think it's important. I have 1,000 other things that's more important than that. So I kind of devaluated something that he cared about. I said, ouch, doesn't feel good. So that is one way I'm going to try to make sure I have enough space in daily actions to know when it's time to engage, when it's time to connect, and when it's time just to take it easy, and I just go out and sit under a tree for 5 minutes, and then I can continue from there. And so we mentioned 3 other ways of putting an end to anger, whether someone's bodily actions are not kind, or whether their speech is not kind, but that we still recognize some kindness in their heart. But there's also at times when we come across someone who seems to not have any kindness in their bodily actions, in their speech, or even in their heart. it seems like there's nothing that can be called kindness. And in the sutra, it gives an image of a person. We're here with you. Yeah, it's okay. And so this person is hungry and thirsty, exhausted, in need of some care. And so this image that is, actually all the 5 ways have a beautiful image, is well worth reading. You'll find it in our chanting book. And so this person is thirsty and hungry and exhausted, is hot out, doesn't have any water, and kind of faints on the path. Like clearly not being able to make it to the next village. And if no one shows up, it's like bad luck. And so someone comes along and sees this person's state. So that of being hungry and thirsty, exhausted and fainting on the path is describing someone whose bodily actions are not kind, whose words are not kind, and in whose heart there's nothing that can be called kindness. And help us to understand that that is someone that's undergoing great pain and suffering. And unless they find a spiritual friend, they will have no chance to transform and overcome their difficulties. And so in this, it helps to remind ourselves that actually we all have the capacity to be kind, capacity to be loving and understanding. But due to causes and condition, it hasn't been able to manifest. It's been hidden, it's been buried, maybe even been walled in. So here we can see again how understanding is love, the understanding this person's situation. We might have enough compassion to take them to the next village, to make sure they get food and rest and water, maybe medicine, so that they can transform and heal. And so this is to look at like, okay, so who are these people in our lives? Maybe they're close, maybe they're far away, and how can we offer them any kind of support, any kind of care that will help them transform? And it empowers us too. We're not sucked into their situation or their unkindness, but actually we're holding our compassion. We're holding our understanding. So to be able to do that, we need all the kind of resources we've been talking about, all the nourishment, relying on good friends and people we care about, of nature, of beautiful things. And there's a 5th way of putting an end to anger, because sometimes, even if someone's words are very kind, their actions are very kind, and their hearts are full of kindness, we still get upset with them. Maybe we're jealous with them. Maybe we're comparing ourselves to them. Maybe we're trying to find faults in them. So there's also, if you're wise, you know how to live happily with someone like that and celebrating all the different good qualities they have, right? And so to be nourished by that and go in that direction together. So 5 ways of putting an end to anger, so that we'll be able to express other energies and other emotions through our actions and through our words. We'll wrap up with a couple images. This is from a wilderness hike in Alaska in August. We're sitting along this stream. And so again, to invite us into community, invite us into friendships that nourishes us and support us. If we feel lonely, separated, it's going to be difficult to transform and grow and to be a source of beauty and transformation in the world, even our close family or expanded circles. So that of finding others that we can share and walk the path with. And so one resource of inspiration I have is the Yes magazine. This latest issue is really the Earth Holder issue. It's mostly about healing and transformative actions in the world, both socially, environmentally, and so on. The issue is the building bridges issue. So you see the Earth Holder Bodhisattva is expressing itself in many ways. And there's a couple of interesting articles in there, and then one is about the practical farmers of Iowa. And so there's this group of 40 or so farmers in Iowa that come together for workshops and visiting each other's farms to learn from each other. Because they're facing climate change. They're facing, eruptive or not normal weather patterns and tendencies. Sometimes a lot of rain, which create the problem with erosion, topsoil erosion. And so it's also beautiful in there because they're saying like some are climate deniers in terms of human-caused climate change, and some understand that is humans' use of fossil fuels and animal agriculture that is the main contributors to the heating of or changing of the climate and the overall heating. But as farmers, they have to be very practical because they grow food, and they're dependent on the sunshine and the rain in a way that most of us aren't. So they're also finding then these practical ways of listening to each other, of sharing, disregarding of political views and how they see the topics of climate change. So it's a beautiful way of building bridges between people that maybe otherwise would see each other as enemies or something, right? And another article talk about the better angels. They've been organizing dinner parties and panel sharings, and they're more in the political environment, so they're making sure they have people from both political parties to just get to know each other. It's not to change each other's views, it's not to talk about politics, but to connect with each other as human beings. To realizing, you have things you care about that I also care about. And so it's very easy that it becomes polarized and fighting if you just have two, right? I grew up in Sweden, and I think we have at least 7 parties in the parliament. So it make a little bit more dynamic situation. But so Better Angels, they keep organizing different events throughout the US in terms of connecting with each other's humanity and not getting caught in our views, our ideas about each other. And so that's also when we touch the humanity in us, we can also come in contact with the beauty and the resources in each other in a different way, like the farmers in Iowa. And so when we're able to touch the present moment, to be nourished, and also to have our eyes and ears and hearts open for the suffering in the world, we also need to look deeply into see how do we want to engage, whether it's the way we eat or whether it's the way we travel, whether we can volunteer our time or get engaged in justice issues, environmental issues, of joining people in the streets when there's big march going on. So this is from the Keep Fossil Fuels in the Ground in LA several years ago. I think the last time we joined a walk was the last school strikes for climate on September 20th. The brothers and the Open Heart Sangha down in San Diego organized a sitting meditation at the high school before the walk. And to that I'm also lending the peace and the love and the care for the growing environmental movement. And we can see for any changes happening on a bigger scale they all have love at their core. Whether you look at the liberation of India with Gandhi's role modeling, or Nelson Mandela and the ending of apartheid, or taking steps toward justice in South Africa, or with Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movements. You can see there's love at the core. But there's also a big vision. It's not just a small little, like, okay, we just want to do this, but it's like a big vision. And you're bringing a lot of people together. And somehow when we're aware of a need and we come together, there's also resources and strengths in ourselves and each other that in a day-to-day basis, we're just going through our daily life, we don't tap into them. And so as a way of transforming is to see how am I wasting my time? How am I caught in small comforts, my little daily concerns, and how much am I able to step into my ultimate concern? Whatever that is, it's for all of us to, when we stop, we can also look deeply into what is our aspiration, and our aspiration, our volition, our deep intention is a source of energy. It's a nourishment for us that we can also return to and rely on and come back to. The path of transformation is like we'll take steps and we fall over and we stand back up again. Maybe we have friends helping us to stand back on our feet and we continue. And so as a way for Deer Park and the residential community to engage and to offer ourselves to the world is also to make this a refreshing, peaceful, and a loving refuge for all to come. So sometimes when people start driving up the hill, they're saying, I already feel peaceful. When you start walking up the hill, okay, I touched something different. So I hope that your relationship with Deer Park will continue to evolve, and that it will not be just based in the space of Deer Park, but that there's the qualities of Deer Park in your hearts that you continue to bring into your lives and into the world. And so it's not a place, it's not a separate entity, but it's something that is manifesting through the way we live, through the way we look at each other, through the way we speak and we act. So thank you so much for being part of this manifestation of kindness. Thank you.